begin? All right, we should be recording. So I've got the news page up, and I guess I'm first this week. So here's a article. I said, all right, here's an article. There have been 2 people so far that have replied that they tried to enter the country, and I think this guy was Palestinian, the other one may have been also, and the border control agents searched their phone and found other people's postings on social networks and refused to let them in, blaming them for the postings that other people put up. So, like if somebody tweets something, it'll appear on your Twitter stream, but it's not even from you, and they don't seem to understand that. So anyway, I'm not quite sure what to make of this, although I saw yesterday that the first person who was denied going to Harvard later forgave that person and let them in. But I guess this is an unintended consequence of sort of the do not fly list and all that. But it's relatively troubling, I think. Anyway, got anything to say about that, or should we just go on to one of Liz's?
Well, I think it's interesting in that I was reading that article that you posted, and one of the interesting things I thought about that was that it said in that article that it had increased fourfold in the last 4 years, the warrantless searching of devices, and that's a pretty big jump in 4 years, and I think that it's definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I know. Of course, people who are not citizens have no privacy rights at all, and this is why we're constantly in trouble with European countries using American services. And as far as I can tell, there's been no solution of that except to just make a legislative fiction where we pretend that the companies will add some privacy so they can pretend it's legal to use the services, but it's not. It doesn't actually touch the basic problem.
I'm pretty sure that U.S. citizens also forego their right to not have their devices searched when they cross back over the border.
Oh, that's true. Yes. Anybody crossing the border, anything you carry over the border can be searched. And then I think we're nowhere near having any regulations controlling what you can do with that information once you get it.
Right.
So when you're going to cross over the border, make sure you reset your phone completely. And
absolutely.
I've heard people say that. I know Liz was taking burners to China and stuff. I just haven't worried about it yet. Maybe I'm just too naive, but I don't think I have any secrets on my devices that aren't encrypted. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, why would a Harvard student get denied and get searched?
Oh, they decide they must be a terrorist or one of the relatives is a terrorist. I think that's the point.
Yeah. So fun.
Yeah.
That actually kind of goes hand in hand with my first one, which is regarding U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, who continuing to act without warrants have been caught attaching GPS devices to vehicles crossing the border, and I think that this is problematic once we allow one agency to just go ahead and circumvent the law. So the EFF is following up on this. They actually filed a lawsuit against Border Patrol, so it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Aren't they also representing the Harvard student?
I think so. Good people in that regard. I definitely appreciate the way that they offer legal backing to people that need it in that case.
Yeah, we definitely need the EFF, like the ACLU. They're the only people pushing back, and without them, the government will just go further and further and further.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary that when you consider how small of a contingent that is against the U.S. government, that's just a handful of folks based out of San Francisco right here that are doing that. And so, I try to donate to them when I can. They're one of those good causes. But this right here is a really good illustration of why.
Well, it reminds me of the thing I've been worried about all week, which is Hong Kong. I mean, in America, you can have a small group of like 2 or 3 people that stand up against the government, and our Constitution protects them so they can do that. But in Hong Kong, all those people are marching in the street against China. And I don't think I would have the courage to do that because they'll just run over them with tanks. I don't, at any moment, and I don't think they have anything to stop them except other nations will get mad at them, but I don't think anyone's really going to do anything to them for it. I think it's just their entire lives are protected by nothing more than a possibility of a scandal. That's pretty scary.
Yeah.
I did read something interesting this week. It didn't pertain to Hong Kong, but made me think of Hong Kong, where there was a piece saying that anytime it was something above like 3.2% of the population's involved in political action, it's been successful for the most part. So it'll be interesting to see how that one unfolds too. I understand. I definitely understand why those folks are protesting. I don't know if they're going to get much traction because it does seem like the government's just really asserting their dominance here. But at the same time, wasn't it like 30 years they're supposed to be able to continue, 30 more years they're supposed to be able to continue under their own rule?
It is. They're supposed to get another 30 years of independence from China, but China isn't inclined to honor it. And I really don't see that any other nation cares enough to save them. We will see. Like under Trump, certainly the United States does not care enough to save them, I think. But
it'll be interesting to see what kind of impacts this has on the global banking systems, I think.
Yeah.
And just the overall global culture.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that is one of the few places that the internet's not restricted anymore over there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you want to go on with yours, Irvin?
Sure. A different change of subject. Kind of ties with one of the articles that I brought up last week. NIST made a small business information security publication. It's 54 pages long. It is essentially that article just coming out of NIST. So it has how to understand your risks, safeguarding your information in different forms, working safely and securely. It's a great guide for small businesses who want to get smart and at least have a starting place to how do they secure their business.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Not
great.
arguing with NIST. I taught a whole IPv6 class just using the official NIST recommendation. It's perfectly fine and free.
Mm-hmm. You gonna see something, Liz?
Oh, that's a great resource. Just because, I think a lot of the material that's out there applies to large enterprise businesses. So I think that it's really a step in the right direction that resources like this are becoming available.
Now we can get this in the hands of all the small businesses, and they do.
Absolutely, that's the next step, right?
Yeah, the resources here, it's PDF, anybody can download, but are they seeing it? Are they downloading it? Are they doing it?
All right, that last one's a question too, is do they know how to implement this stuff, or what the what the ramifications are of leaving those holes open,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this gives you traction with management when you go to them with a recommendation and then you have something to back it up, like an official government document saying, look, this is what you're supposed to do. That will help, I think.
And hoping that they have the right people to implement this.
Well, yeah, but of course that's why they need all of our students and us. That's why they hire so many of us.
Yep.
So I've been hearing a lot more about ransomware. Of course, it seems to be growing without limit. And here's an analysis talking about from ProPublica, talking about the effect of insurance. I didn't know cyber insurance had gotten that common, but apparently it is, and people buy it. And the insurance companies just pay the ransom because in practice, even companies with backups, it is so slow and so expensive to use the backups that it's still cheaper to just pay the ransom. So the insurance company will cover the ransom and pay it. And people say this is fueling ransomware. That's one interpretation. My interpretation is ransomware people have underpriced their product. The ransom is low enough that everybody always thoughtlessly pays the ransom. So in a free market system, they should increase the price of the ransomware. But anyway, it certainly is growing like crazy. And I don't see any good solution for this. It's like people that pay ransom for hostages. Every individual person has a strong motivation to pay the ransom, but if people do that, that just makes more crime. This is the tragedy of the commons. The individual's self-interest does not meet society's global self-interest, and I don't think we can outlaw paying ransom, so I guess we're just going to see a lot more ransomware. I don't see a clear solution.
And like you said last week, oftentimes it's cheaper to just pay the ransom than it is to do things properly to begin with and back things up and restore from those backups.
That if you could make a good backup solution that really works efficiently and fast, this would be a good selling point. If you could promise people, if you buy our thing, you won't have to pay the ransom. I don't think anybody's there yet, but that would seem to me like a good free market solution.
Yeah, because are we just gonna sit back and just let this continue? Just continue to pay out and just go, oh well.
I read something this week that was one of the other stories that I almost chose for one of my 3, which was that these attacks are becoming a lot more targeted, in that these companies now are really going after municipalities and smaller companies because they're much more likely to pay the ransom. So, I think that's pretty telling right there because, consider the security posture of those players. Usually it's going to be weaker and they're going to be more desperate to get things up quicker because they can't, small businesses can't afford the losses or the protections of a big enterprise. So that's one reason, Irvin, your list of resources is really, it's really timely, I think.
Yeah. Well, I guess you got one, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so this was kind of an interesting story it's been unfolding a little bit, so the Ring cameras, for anybody that's not familiar, those are they're a combination doorbell / camera system that you install in the front of your house, and Amazon bought Ring recently. Within the last year or so. And so once they did, it's been pretty interesting. They have started this program called the Neighborhood Program, and it's kind of like a neighborhood watch deal. And so their sales department has been heavily pressuring police departments. Now this one focused on Chula Vista here in California, Chula Vista Police Department. They worked on them for a year until they got them to join this program. And it describes some of the sales tactics. They're definitely high pressure sales tactics because they're really, really trying to persuade police departments to join in this program. And one of the things I thought that was interesting was that this cites a study that Ring supposedly did on their own product, saying that that it drastically reduced crime. But MIT took a look at that study, and let's just say that their review of that, MIT's review of that study, came out looking pretty flimsy in the end. So I think it's pretty interesting when stuff like this comes out to light, where private enterprise definitely holds influence over our police.
Yeah. I know it's very similar with the guns. Glock got very involved with police and controlling what weapons they use.
Yeah, and this to me, this is very much a parallel to some of the facial recognition companies that are really doing the hard sell on our like ICE and police departments around the country. There's been some pushback against that in the Bay Area here, which I think is a good thing. I definitely think that we're going to see more and more of those systems, but I definitely also think that those are open to abuse. So
also the license plate readers, a very similar issue.
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking of the facial recognition as you were talking.
Yeah. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to wonder if this Ring program relates to that because, they haven't told us what they're doing with that data.
Right.
Well, I don't think Amazon knows or cares. They just want to sell more of them. And I guess they've made a market decision that rather than pushing privacy, they'd rather push that this will make your neighborhood safer. And it's,
Sure.
with the cooperation of the cops, they've decided that that's their market strategy, is to see yourself as helping the police by getting this thing, which might even be true.
Sure. The evidence so far does not bear out that it helps, but I bet it helps build data sets of people's faces that are paired to their addresses. So,
Well, I would imagine if you put this up, especially if you put up a sign saying we're protected by a ring, then it'll scare away some burglars.
maybe maybe perhaps, but I mean, I'm not sure that the trade-off, the privacy trade-off, is necessarily worth it. But who knows? Who am I to say? One of the things that concerns me with this, though, is that oftentimes with these products, the hardware itself isn't the profit maker. It is the data sets. These companies can sell huge amounts of consumer data for vast sums of money. So,
right, that's just
I'm interested to see what's happening on the back end.
Right.
That's a good point.
Data is money.
Yeah.
Time is money.
You got Kali here, Irvin.
Yeah.
There's a new release out.
Yay.
Mm-hmm.
And they've reworked a couple of stuff. So now all the repositories are on CloudFlare, so it should be faster to update.
Nice.
What I liked is the meta packages.
Oh yeah.
Instead of just throwing everything at you, at least the way that this is sounding like, it's going to be smaller because it'll have its default. You can either choose the default, the large, or the everything.
That's great.
Yeah, well, I just had a couple of guest speakers in my class last week, and they said, "Oh, we ignore Kali. We don't use Kali." And I don't use Kali anymore either. I just use naked Debian servers because I want everything in the cloud. So I used to be a big Kali fan, but I haven't used it this semester yet. Anyway.
Now, if we could just get Windows to do the same thing, if we could download the light version, that would be great.
Yeah, I use the same thing of using Debian on cloud servers. I get the repo from Kali and then whatever tool they have and go off of that.
Yeah.
But for those who will still use Kali, it sounds like it'll be a much smaller image to use and manage.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I know about Kali is every time they make a new version, they break a whole bunch of stuff. So that's one of the many irritations with it.
However, I think their releases have been getting a lot more stable over the past few years. And it seems to be a lot more robust than even it was a year or two ago.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And I use it. I mean, I'm teaching ethical hacking and network defense and advanced ethical hacking this semester, and it's really great for my students to use just because it's got just about everything you need in there. So it definitely, in some cases, can be fairly handy.
Yeah, I'm not teaching those classes anymore. It's probably why I don't need it. But also when I moved to the cloud is when I really lost a lot of its value for me because I didn't have the desktop anymore.
Right.
But, well, anyway, I got a couple links about this one that get a lot of news. People have been using iOS 0 days on a website in watering hole attacks to infect iPhones. And this got a lot of attention. And the thing that struck me is how much this sounded like Titan Rain, the first major watering hole attack. And it turns out this was the government of China again. They've done this many times. So they target an ethnic group or a religion they don't like. It was the Tibetans back then. They put up a website connected to that group, and then they infect you if you view that website. And apparently it was not only iPhones, also I think Android and Windows phones. And anyway, this also explains the surprising thing that they're using 0 days, because the Chinese have a large repository of 0 days, and they use them easily because they have a ton of very smart university students pumping out new 0 days, and they don't mind wasting them. And also from them, this is like the thing with Hong Kong. Their government is very much into taking troublesome minorities and just sort of squashing them. And that is part of their government policy to just get rid of any troublemakers this way, sort of like our attempt to prevent people that we think might be terrorists coming in the border. They will see these groups and target them and just find some way to watch them carefully, put them in a concentration camp and all that jazz. We're not as far from it as we should be over here, but they're certainly very vigorous about it over there. So anyway, it's interesting to hear about. I haven't seen any people that tell you exactly how the 0 days work, although they have some of the information here. But anyway, I thought it was interesting in the viewpoint of iPhone security. You can get your iPhone infected just by viewing a web page. It is not that common, but we shouldn't think it's impossible.
Just like with any device.
Yeah, well, iPhones are so safe that you can imagine they're totally safe, but they're not.
Right.
Anyway.
Kind of harkens back to that old marketing thing that I'm a Mac, I'm a PC.
Yeah, well, iPhones really are a lot better, but there's nothing perfect.
Yeah.
Anyway, you want to talk about Iran here?
Yeah, so this is pretty interesting story that came out a couple days ago in the New York Times. It was about the U.S. government mounting a cyber attack against Iran in June. And I thought it was interesting because, first of all, that this was kind of all over the news. You'd think that this would be a little bit more covert, but I think they wanted people to know about it, just as if anything else, sort of an intimidation tactic. And one of the interesting things to me about this story was that I started doing a little bit of research to see what, because the stories about how we mounted a cyber attack against their paramilitary arm that seizes oil tankers and disrupts oil tanker deliveries. And I thought, well, I didn't know this was a major problem, so I started doing a little bit of research on this, and actually it was kind of interesting. I didn't find much on this until I found one story from July, which was after the attack supposedly happened in June, mentioning this, that the Iranian state had seized a foreign oil tanker from I think it was Panama. So I don't know. I thought this was just very interesting. There were a lot of stories in the media about this attack, the cyber attack. Not so many on how many tankers they'd seized, or that this was a major problem. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is. And Irvin, you've got one?
I do.
Malvertising.
Yes. On WordPress, yet again.
Yeah.
WordPress just keeps coming up over and over.
Yep.
This one is about plugins. There's a list of plugins that they have that have fallen to cross-site scripting attacks. They did find that it's all coming from one IP address.
Mm-hmm.
And they have some examples of the obfuscation code that they were using and how they were trying to add scripts into the plugins to cause issues. And their basic conclusion is make sure your plugins are updated.
That's what they always say. Another thing is just don't bother using very many plugins on WordPress. I mean, they're not audited. It's that's a common recommendation. But WordPress is huge. Years ago, they said it was 7% of the web. I know our college is moving to Drupal, which is amazing because Drupal has had such huge security disasters. I'm using them in the Purple Team competition, Drupal-geddon 2 and Drupal-geddon 3. So they didn't ask me before they decided to do that.
Yeah, I know Cabrillo's thinking of switching to Drupal, and I immediately said, no, do not do it.
Well, to be fair, they patched it, but gee, their reputation is bad. I don't know if the other thing they're using is any better. WordPress can be secure if you're careful, but people usually aren't.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that's true for anything. Anything is secure if you're careful.
Oh, there's some things that are just so broken you can't fix them, but anyway, it's
yeah.
I mean, this comes back to like during my time as a developer, some of the biggest problems I saw were from time saving measures, like using stuff like this where, you know, in some cases, like, you know, you shouldn't roll your own crypto, but rolling your own CMS is not always a bad idea, especially when you can strip it down to basics. And a lot of time, I think people think they need a lot of bells and whistles, which they really don't. And that opens up a good attack surface a lot of the time, because that's when you start incorporating these plugins, and yeah, it can get ugly real fast.
I've had people come to me frequently and say, your website is really hard to use and old-fashioned. You should upgrade to WordPress. And so far, they haven't convinced me, but I am aware that my lack of using a CMS just means it's a random pile of junk and not organized or anything. So, you know, if I was running a big company, I probably would see you need a CMS.
Yeah. I mean, I got off of Wix this weekend.
Nice.
Just because it was too slow for me to use. And then when I downloaded my own page using wget, it had like 6,000 lines of code.
Yeah.
Like, what? And then I stripped it down to like 100. Like, wow. And it loads way faster because, yeah, it doesn't have all of their metrics. It doesn't have thousands of lines of just dedicated to nothing but downloading every single font possible. And I'm only using one font. So I'm like, wait, why does this have so much crap, so much metadata? Yeah.
Well, I think this is the difference between, you know, custom solutions and commercial solutions. You know,
yes and no. Yes and no, because I've seen some real software gore out there in the wild. One of them was a company that had hired me to overhaul a CMS it was just a single page. It was just a single page app. And I mean, this thing had like over 9,000 files, and just the CSS alone was over 7,000 lines. It was insane, because a lot of the time people will use like templating engines, and then stuff like this where it gets so out of control so fast. And it's just like Irvin said, like, they don't optimize for anything other than being quick and easy to put up. Maintainability, usability, those are not really big concerns.
Well, you know, human life matters. You just want to make it easier to use.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's it for this week. Any other comments?
No.
All right. I'm going to stop it and publish it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.